Ellen and I haven't spoken in years, and in a relationship, and I think many of us have.
She was not born into light. She was born into fire. Anne Heche entered this world like a spark struck in darkness, brief, brilliant, and always in danger of being extinguished. On screen, she carried the face of a leading lady, confident, radiant, composed. She stood beside Hollywood royalty, delivered performances praised for their emotional precision, and walked red carpets as cameras carved her image into public memory. In the late 1990s, her name promised depth, intelligence, and box office appeal. But behind that polished surface lived a different story. A story without applause. A story written long before fame arrived. While audiences saw a rising star, Anne was carrying a childhood shaped by silence, fear, and survival. While Hollywood celebrated her courage and originality, it recoiled the moment she stopped fitting its expectations. And while the world debated her choices, her mind was fighting battles no spotlight could illuminate. Success did not erase the past. It amplified it. Each flash of the camera sharpened old wounds. Each headline narrowed the space she had left to breathe. And then, one day, the story ended in flames. Sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. So the question is not how a Hollywood star fell. The question is this: how much pain can a human being endure before the light that once saved them becomes the fire that consumes them? Anne Heche did not grow up learning how to dream. She grew up learning how to survive. Childhood. Where the fracture began, Anne Celeste. Heche was born in 1969 in Aurora, Ohio. The youngest of 5 children in a family that appeared ordinary from the outside and unbearably unstable from within. Her father was a traveling choir director. Her mother, a homemaker trying to keep order in a house that never truly felt safe. The family moved frequently, chasing temporary work, temporary churches, temporary stability. Nothing stayed long enough to become solid. Behind closed doors, Anne's childhood was marked by trauma that would later define the architecture of her mind. She would speak years later about sexual abuse that began when she was very young. Abuse, she said, came from the one person a child is taught to trust unconditionally. Whether the world believed her or not would become a recurring theme of her life. What mattered was that she lived with it, every day. Her father lived a double life in an era that punished such secrets. He was gay, deeply closeted, and consumed by shame imposed by religion and society. That tension saturated the household. Love existed, but it was brittle. Affection existed, but it was conditional. Silence was the dominant language. When Anne was 13, her father died of AIDS-related complications. The family never spoke openly about how or why. The truth was buried beneath euphemisms and fear. For Anne, the loss was not just the death of a parent. It was the collapse of whatever fragile structure had been holding her world together. Grief arrived without explanation. Trauma arrived without acknowledgement. Her mother, overwhelmed by loss and poverty, began to unravel. Mental illness, later diagnosed as schizophrenia, entered the home like a slow-moving storm. Arguments turned volatile. Stability vanished entirely. Anne learned quickly that adults could not protect her. So she did something children sometimes do when reality becomes unbearable. She escaped inward. Anne later described creating alternate mental spaces, places where pain could not reach her. She dissociated. She survived by dividing herself, fragment by fragment. It was not madness. It was adaptation. A child's mind doing whatever it must to endure the unbearable. By the time the family relocated to Chicago, Anne was already carrying a lifetime of experiences most people never face. She was not naive. She was not innocent in the way society expects children to be. She was watchful, controlled, and profoundly alone. Adolescence, the will to be seen. In Chicago, Anne discovered performance. Theater was not an ambition, it was oxygen. On stage, emotions had names, pain had structure, chaos could be rehearsed, repeated, controlled. For the first time, her inner world made sense to other people. She attended the Francis W. Parker School, an elite institution that contrasted sharply with her financial reality. While classmates planned futures backed by security, Anne navigated scholarship pressures and family instability. She worked, constantly, modeling jobs, small acting gigs, anything that paid. And at 16, she made a decision that would alter her trajectory forever. She left home. There was no dramatic farewell, no safety net. Just a teenage girl with talent, trauma, and an unshakable sense that staying would mean disappearing. She supported herself through modeling and commercial work, learning early how to present confidence even when she felt hollow inside. This was the pattern that would follow her for decades. Composure on the surface, turmoil underneath. She moved to New York City and landed a role on the soap opera Another World. The show was not prestigious, but it was consistent. It paid, it gave her visibility, and more importantly, it gave her validation. She won a Daytime Emmy Award for her performance, an astonishing achievement for someone barely out of adolescence. The industry noticed. Our casting directors saw her intensity, her intelligence, her unpredictability. But unpredictability is only celebrated when it remains profitable. Early career, Hollywood opens the door. By the mid-1990s, Anne transitioned into film. She was not cast as decoration. She was cast as substance. Directors trusted her with complexity. She played women who thought, who resisted, who burned quietly. Her breakthrough came with Donnie Brasco, starring alongside Al Pacino and Johnny Depp. In a film saturated with masculine tension, Anne's performance stood out precisely because it was restrained. She did not compete. She grounded the story. Critics praised her depth. Hollywood took note. Roles followed. Volcano, Wag the Dog, 6 Days, 7 Nights. She moved effortlessly between drama and blockbuster spectacle. She was not boxed into a single archetype. She could be vulnerable, sharp, romantic, intimidating. By the late 1990s, Anne Heche was no longer an emerging talent. She was established, bankable, a leading woman. From the outside, it looked like ascension. From the inside, the pressure intensified. Fame did not heal her childhood wounds. It illuminated them. Interviews demanded personal anecdotes. Publicists encouraged carefully curated vulnerability. The industry wanted access, but not too much truth. Anne had never learned how to live halfway inside herself. The moment that changed everything. In 1997, Anne made a choice that would define her public narrative more than any performance she ever delivered. She fell in love, openly, with another woman. Her relationship with Ellen DeGeneres was not hidden, and it was not ambiguous. It was visible at a time when Hollywood still treated queerness as a liability, especially for women expected to play romantic leads opposite men. Anne did not ask permission. She did not soften the truth. She spoke about love with sincerity and conviction. The response was swift and brutal. Roles vanished, meetings stopped, invitations dried up. Industry whispers framed her as difficult, unstable, a risk. She later said she felt as though she had been erased overnight. Not criticized, not debated, removed. Hollywood did not punish her for who she loved. It punished her for refusing to perform acceptable silence. The breakup with DeGeneres compounded the fallout. What had been framed as courage quickly became framed as instability. Anne's mental health struggles, once private, became public spectacle. Every misstep was magnified, every vulnerability weaponized. The industry that once applauded her intensity now recoiled from it. The unraveling. The early 2000s were marked by inconsistency. Anne continued working, stage productions, independent films, television. But the trajectory had shifted. She was no longer riding momentum, she was fighting perception. In 2000, she experienced a highly publicized mental health crisis that would follow her like a shadow. Media coverage reduced a deeply personal episode to tabloid fodder. Compassion was absent. Context was irrelevant. The narrative was sealed. Anne tried to explain. She spoke openly about dissociation, about trauma, about survival mechanisms formed in childhood. The world listened selectively. She was either sensationalized or dismissed, rarely understood. Yet she kept going. She married. She had a son. She sought stability with determination that bordered on defiance. She returned to theater, where audiences were closer and applause felt earned. She wrote. She reflected. She tried to reclaim authorship over her own story. But trauma does not disappear because time passes. It waits. It resurfaces. It demands reckoning. Anne oscillated between moments of clarity and periods of chaos. She was candid about therapy, about healing, about relapse. She refused to present a sanitized version of recovery. That honesty made some uncomfortable. It made others cruel. Still, she persisted. A life lived without anesthesia. What distinguished Anne Heche from many of her peers was not talent alone. It was exposure. She lived without emotional anesthesia. Everything reached her fully. Love, rejection, memory, grief. In Hollywood, that is dangerous. The industry rewards performance, not processing. Image, not integration. Anne never mastered the art of emotional concealment. She spoke when silence was expected. She felt when numbness was preferred. She aged in an industry that punishes women for survival. She carried scars in a culture that prefers illusions. And yet, even as opportunities narrowed, she continued creating. Television appearances, independent cinema, memoirs, stage work, each role less glamorous perhaps, but more honest. She was not chasing fame anymore. She was chasing coherence. By the final years of her life, Anne was reflecting publicly on her journey, on trauma, on forgiveness, on the cost of truth. She spoke about breaking cycles, about protecting her children from the silence she endured. But there was no neat resolution, no triumphant comeback arc. There was simply a woman still walking, still working, still trying to live inside herself without splintering. And then came the moment that would eclipse everything else. But that belongs to the next chapter. By the time the world began calling her troubled, Anne Heche had already been fighting for decades. The tragedy of her life was not sudden. It was cumulative. The slow violence of misunderstanding. There is a particular cruelty reserved for people whose pain is visible. Society tolerates suffering best when it remains quiet, distant, and easy to package. Anne's pain refused all three. As the years passed, Hollywood's relationship with her grew colder. Casting rooms closed with polite smiles. Scripts stopped arriving. And meetings ended with phrases that meant nothing and explained everything. She was no longer a risk worth taking. The label followed her everywhere. Unstable. It was a word that erased context, a word that ignored origin, a word that transformed survival mechanisms into character flaws. When Anne spoke about dissociation, about trauma, about the mind's ability to fracture under unbearable weight. Her honesty was not met with curiosity. It was met with suspicion. She became an object lesson rather than a human being. And yet, she continued working. Theater became her refuge again. On stage, the audience could feel the truth vibrating beneath her voice. In independent films, she found space to be imperfect, raw, unpolished. She was not chasing redemption arcs. She was chasing meaning. But the body remembers what the world tries to forget. The return of the past trauma is patient. It waits until life slows down, until distractions fade, until the nervous system, exhausted from vigilance, loosens its grip. For Anne, triggers came in waves. Interviews dredged up childhood. Media recycled old footage. The internet, relentless and eternal, refused to let the past stay buried. Each headline reopened wounds that never fully closed. Her relationships reflected the same instability she was trying to escape. Love arrived intensely and left abruptly. Trust was hard-won and easily shaken. She wanted connection, but connection required safety, and safety had been absent for too long. Motherhood brought purpose and fear in equal measure. Anne loved fiercely. She wanted to protect her children from the chaos she endured. But protection requires internal stability, and stability was something she had to build from scratch. She spoke openly about therapy, about setbacks, about learning how to live without splitting herself into fragments. This kind of transparency is often praised in theory and punished in practice. Hollywood prefers recovery stories with clean lines and happy endings. Anne's story refused to simplify itself. The public collapse narrative. In the early 2000s, the media shifted from fascination to fixation. Any unusual behavior became proof. Any misstep became spectacle. Complex mental health struggles were flattened into punchlines and headlines. There is a moment when a person stops being seen as capable of change. Anne crossed that threshold without knowing it. From that point on, every action was interpreted through a single lens. Not context, not history, just expectation. When she appeared disoriented, the world did not ask why. When she disappeared briefly, the world assumed the worst. Compassion was replaced with confirmation bias. This was not a single event. It was erosion, a life worn thin by misunderstanding, the illusion of distance. In her later years, Anne seemed to find a fragile equilibrium. She worked steadily, if quietly. She wrote. She spoke about healing with a voice that carried both conviction and fatigue. There was an attempt, sincere, visible, to integrate her past rather than outrun it. But equilibrium is not immunity. Stress returned, financial pressure mounted. The industry had not fully forgiven her, and it never forgot. Even small controversies reignited old narratives, and the margin for error was gone. She lived under a microscope that only activated when she faltered. And then came the day when the story could no longer be contained. The final hours. On an afternoon in August 2022, Anne drove through Los Angeles. What happened next unfolded in minutes, but its reverberations would last far longer. Her car struck a garage. Witnesses later described confusion, urgency, and fear. She did not stop. She kept driving. Moments later, her vehicle crashed into a house. The impact was catastrophic. The car burst into flames, a column of smoke rising into the sky like a signal flare no one wanted to see. The images spread instantly. A burning car, firefighters, helicopter footage, a stretcher. In the age of constant surveillance, tragedy does not unfold privately. It is broadcast, dissected, replayed. The internet consumed the footage with a speed that left no room for restraint. Anne was alive when she was pulled from the wreckage. Barely, severely burned, fighting. For days, the world watched updates trickle in. Hope flickered, then dimmed. Doctors spoke of catastrophic injury, of irreversible damage. When Anne Heche died, the headlines arrived fully formed. But something was missing. Silence. Silence for the child who learned to disappear to survive. Silence for the woman who loved without apology. Silence for the artist who refused to numb herself for comfort. The question no one wanted to ask, was it an accident? Yes. Was it preventable? Perhaps. But those questions, while necessary, were incomplete. When the harder question, the one rarely asked, was this: how does a person reach a moment where everything collapses at once? Anne's death was framed as a shocking end. In truth, it was the visible crest of an invisible wave that had been building for years. A convergence of trauma, exhaustion, pressure, and isolation. The fire did not begin that day. It had been smoldering since childhood. After the flames and the aftermath, tributes appeared. Co-stars spoke kindly. Commentators urged empathy. Mental health advocates reminded the public that illness is not a moral failure. But empathy after death is easier than responsibility during life. The system that failed Anne did not collapse with her. It moved on. It always does. Hollywood continued. The news cycle turned. Attention shifted. What remained was a question hanging in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. What if someone had listened sooner? What if honesty had been met with care instead of caution? What if vulnerability had not been treated as liability? The anatomy of a breaking point, Anne Heche did not die because she was weak. She died because strength alone is not enough when pain goes untreated, when support is conditional, and when the world decides it has seen enough of your struggle. Her life was not a cautionary tale about fame. It was a cautionary tale about neglect. Neglect of trauma, neglect of context, neglect of humanity. She was not consumed by fire in her final moments. She had been slowly consumed by silence for most of her life. And silence, unlike flames, leaves no smoke. In the final chapters of her life, Anne Heche was no longer chasing applause. She was chasing quiet. So a life stripped of illusion. The years before her death were not marked by grand comebacks or headline-grabbing triumphs. They were marked by something far rarer in Hollywood: persistence without spectacle. Anne continued to work, on stage, on independent sets, in spaces where the cameras were closer and the expectations more humane. She wrote, she spoke, she reflected. She tried, again and again, to tell her story in her own words, rather than let it be told for her. She spoke about childhood trauma with clarity that came not from distance, but from repetition. About dissociation as a survival tool, not a defect. About healing as a nonlinear process. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes the reverse. She did not promise redemption. She promised honesty. This honesty was never easy, and it required reopening wounds in a culture that prefers scars to remain decorative and silent. It required admitting that success did not cure her, that love did not erase memory, that motherhood did not automatically stabilize a fractured nervous system. It required standing in front of the world without anesthesia. What she wanted, it seemed, was not absolution. It was coherence. To live in one piece. The courage to remain visibility had cost Anne dearly. And yet, she refused to vanish. She refused the clean disappearance that would have made others more comfortable. She kept speaking because silence, for her, had always been lethal. In interviews, she talked about forgiveness, not as an act of moral superiority, but as a practical necessity. Carrying hatred, she said, was too heavy. It burned too much energy. Forgiveness, in her telling, was not about excusing harm. It was about refusing to let harm dictate the rest of her life. She spoke about her children with fierce devotion, about breaking cycles, about ensuring that the silence she grew up with would not be inherited. If there was a legacy she fought hardest for, it was this: that her sons would grow up knowing their pain could be named, addressed, and held without shame. She did not pretend to have reached peace. She acknowledged the work was ongoing. That was the truth she offered. In a culture obsessed with closure, Anne lived without it, what the world chose to remember. When Anne died, the world rushed to define her. Headlines condensed decades into a handful of words. Clips replayed. Narratives hardened. The internet did what it always does. It simplified. She became, for some, a cautionary tale. For others, a misunderstood soul. For many, a shocking image frozen in flames. But these frames missed the essential truth. Anne Heche was not a moment. She was a process. A long, difficult, often painful process of a human being trying to live honestly inside a system that rewarded polish over truth and compliance over courage. She was not destroyed by fame alone. She was worn down by conditional acceptance, by a world that celebrated her when she performed strength and recoiled when she revealed vulnerability. Her death forced a conversation that had been postponed too long about mental health, about trauma, about the cost of silence. But conversations after loss are always quieter than interventions before it. Empathy arrived late. The lesson Hollywood avoids Hollywood likes its tragedies neat: a rise, a fall, a moral, a lesson easily digested. Anne's life resists that structure. Her story teaches something far less comfortable: that talent does not protect against trauma, that honesty can be punished, and that systems designed to entertain are often ill-equipped to care. It asks an unsettling question. How many people are labeled difficult simply because their pain refuses to stay hidden? Anne did not fit the recovery narrative the industry prefers. She did not re-emerge with a glowing smile and a single sentence about being stronger now. She re-emerged with complexity, with nuance, with ongoing struggle. That made people uneasy. But unease is not failure. It is an invitation. What remains after the noise fades? When the cameras turn away and the headlines stop updating, what remains is quieter and more enduring. A body of work that reveals emotional intelligence rather than vanity. A record of courage in choosing truth over approval. A reminder that survival is not a straight line. Anne Heche leaves behind performances that still breathe, still ache, still matter. She leaves behind words that speak to those who grew up without protection and learned to build inner worlds to survive. She leaves behind children who know their mother fought, not perfectly, not always successfully, but relentlessly. And she leaves behind a question that lingers long after the footage fades. What would change if we treated vulnerability not as a liability, but as a signal for care? A closing reflection. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Anne Heche's life is not how it ended, but how rarely the world paused to truly listen while she was still speaking. She told us where the pain came from. She told us how it shaped her. She told us what she needed. We heard her, but we did not know how to hold what we heard. And so, the responsibility does not end with remembrance. It begins there. If her story teaches anything, it is this: compassion delayed is compassion denied. Silence is not neutrality. And survival should never require a person to fracture themselves into something more acceptable. Anne Heche lived without armor. That made her luminous. That made her vulnerable. That made her human. And perhaps that is the most uncomfortable truth of all. So if you find yourself in her story, if you recognize the exhaustion of carrying unseen wounds, the loneliness of being misunderstood, the courage it takes to keep speaking, know this: you are not broken. You are responding. And there is still time to be heard.